Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have an outstanding episode for you about a watch that I'm pretty crazy about. This is the Zenith El Primero Chronomaster Original. A little bit about Zenith. They were founded back in 1860. They're a Swiss-made luxury brand, really famous for their contributions and innovation, kind of within the realm of mechanical and automatic chronographs. Now, of course, some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for a chronograph. You're typically going to see external pushers to activate timing functions. You're going to get multiple subdials to measure elapsed time, often featuring additional scales dependent on the subgenre. Now, the Chronomaster Original is crafted in a 38mm case in the same proportions as the famous original A386. Paired with the iconic tricolor dial and steel bracelet. And then this is powered by the El Primero 3600 automatic high frequency chronograph movement with the 1/10 of a second chronograph function and a power reserve of 60 hours. Now these typically go for $9,500 at pretty much full list price, but you can get this from Belmont Watches for $8,300, so a nice little discount there. This segment was actually brought to you in part by Belmont Watches. They're actually located in San Diego area, and so am I, and I met with the team over there downtown not too long ago, picked up a couple units to kind of feature on the channel, and yeah, it's very cool, so I don't have to always buy every single watch that comes in. And this is one that honestly I would probably never be able to buy, just because I'm, as you've known from the channel, I'm not somebody who, you know, very casually spends $8,000 on a watch. But I have to say, I was planning to get a Speedmaster Professional this year. Spending time with this Zenith, I'm a little torn, and I'm looking forward to kind of telling you guys why. So with that said, let's zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, Belmont Watches, as you can see right here. Let the camera focus. All right, so this watch, wow, it pretty much has everything. Again, this isn't my watch, so there you are going to see, you know, the little plastic coverings on there protecting the shiny bits and whatnot, but I will definitely share with you what I can about this gorgeous piece. I love it. The dimensions are pretty straightforward. It's 38mm in diameter, 13mm thick, and 46mm lug to lug. I will say that even though this is only a 38, it wears much larger because of this dial. Check that out. There's pretty much no bezel on here, so the dial is really pushed out, much larger dial that you would expect. And you can see, of course, the oversized sub registers, and this gives it so much pop and wrist presence, even though it's a 38. So it's a 38, which means it's going to kind of almost melt away on the wrist because it's smaller, but the visual weight is quite punchy. Honestly, it looks visually probably closer to something like a 41. So really, really impressed with this piece. The profile, again, also very slick and smart. So the way that they achieve this bezel-less design is everything is pretty much rear loaded. So this crystal here and that little that chamfer, that polish right there along the outer edge isn't actually a bezel. That's the case. And then this is just plugged right in. Everything is loaded from the rear, which is really going to be where any of that thickness comes from. And I love the visual line where they have a really thin mid case. So this is pretty much visually how thin the watch is going to appear. And then you have another kind of couple of steps instead of like a seamless bubble back. I think having those steps again helps break down the visual weight, and it makes this watch wear so much thinner than it actually is. So a lot of great tricks from the wearability standpoint that, you know, as much as I love this dial and this aesthetic, and as much as respect as I have for the brand, stuff like that, it makes me want the watch a lot more just because of the wearability. Now, this, we got to get the chrono action. Oh yes. And some of you are probably noticing, wow, this chronograph it seems like it's moving a little bit quicker. It's because it's not taking 60 seconds to go full rotation. It's taking 10 seconds. So what that chrono hand is effectively measuring is tenths of a second. And it's doing it in beautiful fashion. So gorgeous. Also very niche though, from that perspective, because most of us are used to timing these watches, with more traditional means. But that dial, the aesthetic, everything comes together really beautifully. This movement, goodness, guys, it's gorgeous. Let me crack open the clasp here to give you guys a better look. Check that out. That has to be probably one of the best looking movements ever featured on the channel. I would pull the bracelet off if this was my watch, and who knows, maybe in the future. Wow, because this has really left an impression on me. You can see that blued column wheel. I mean, fully in-house, beautifully done. High beats, guys. This is beating at 10 ticks per second with that 5 hertz movement. Column wheel and lateral clutch systems with a 60-hour power reserve. Hard to argue with those specs. This crystal is beautiful, and I'm glad that they didn't. I think it actually adds some balance by having it that beautiful kind of box domed effect there on the sapphire. And then we get down into some of the details, of course, applied indices, guys. That pale silvery white dial. A lot of folks are going to call this a white dial, but you can see the date disc is white. So I hesitate to call this a white dial because it does have kind of a silvery tone to it. A very pale silver, which visually will be very white, but not quite a kind of true or flat white from that perspective. And then you do get the date at the 4.5 o'clock, which can be a point of contention for a few people, maybe even many people, but it is historically accurate, and I think it's integrated well. Not quite as well as black dial variants with a black disc. I think it does seem to flow a bit better. Maybe if they used a silver disc on that date window, it would help it, I think, blend just a touch better. You have, of course, the iconic tricolor subdials there with that kind of light gray, dark gray, and blue. Really beautiful. You're getting 5 atmospheres or 50 meters of water resistance, which is great. 19 millimeter lugs. So 19 millimeters, it's an odd number, but you do get quite an outstanding bracelet here, guys. Solid links and end links. 19 to 16 millimeter taper on that 3-link setup with, polished, highly polished center links, and then you do have those nicely chamfered outer flanks there, really beautifully finished. I mean, this is by all accounts, a luxury timepiece. Although it is quite functional and quite sporty, it really does, everything that it's supposed to do. And yeah, even down to wearability, you do get this milled clasp with 5 individual micro adjust holes, milled folding section as well, and everything is just very, very tidy, very handsome. You do have it signed with that signature 5-point star. Whew, this thing is gorgeous, guys. Let me know, what do you think in the comments? I feel like this is almost, it has more personality than the Speedmaster. Like, as much as I love the Speedmaster for how kind of infinitely versatile it is, this Zenith is just like, it says something. It's saying a lot of things, and I'm hearing it, and I'm loving what it's telling me. This has just been such a gorgeous piece. But let's go ahead, drape it over the wrist. I'm not going to make any adjustments or anything on the bracelet, but we'll get a little drape so you guys can see how it wears. All right, guys, as you can see on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, this doesn't look small by any means. I mean, this thing has a ton of wrist presence. Again, it's a 38, guys, and it wears beautifully. And you can see it's nice and flat on the wrist. That height is really mitigated down by all of those undercuts and compartmentalization kind of underneath that upper mid case, and then everything is nicely balanced by that beautiful distortion in that box domed sapphire. This thing is just so killer. Of course, again, I didn't size it for my wrist, but I did want to let you guys see just how flat it wears. Hugs the wrist really nicely. It's only a small portion that is kind of laying on the flat part of the wrist, while everything else is slightly elevated. But the way everything curves and undercuts, it actually does help it feel quite secure and low slung. But man, that is just gorgeous. Even though they are female end links, I will say that they don't drape down quite as flat as you might expect from a female end link. Honestly, it has a similar profile to a male end link in terms of how much it's going to protrude away from the case. Not a big deal for me at about 7.5 inches on the wrist. Again, this thing, it just hits such a sweet spot. And I do have another 38 millimeter chronograph in my Hamilton little field chrono, and it does not wear nearly as nice as this. And honestly, as much of a bracelet guy that I am, and although 19 is an odd lug width, you can absolutely find straps for 19 millimeter, especially when you're thinking about the kind of vintage rally straps would really just pop on this piece and just bring it to even more life. I will say, on the bracelet, although very versatile, it is a little bit more sedate in terms of that color play and everything. It does feel a little bit more monochromatic than it probably is. But if you put that on some type of, even deep blue Horween strap, or maybe an oxblood color, or maybe something just perforated rally style, I mean, there's just so many tones that would go amazing with this in terms of the theme, as well as just the color play, because of those great, man, look at this thing. I can't get enough of it. So let's actually take this piece off, get into some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. All right, we'll go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, really quite handsome. This isn't a loom beast by any means, but it absolutely does do the job in terms of legibility in the dark. But one thing I like to do is actually work in some low light transition, just so you can get an idea of what this piece will look like in less than optimal lighting, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you can be coming in and out of a building, walking underneath an overhang or the shade of a tree, or just spending time in your favorite automobile, which I think this watch would really be right at home with. But I also like to get an idea of what those look like under harsher lighting conditions, very high contrast, as you can see here. But even with everything really blown out there in terms of the lighting, you can still see beautiful luster on even the polished center links, and the fine brushing across those beautiful links there on the outer portion just hold the light very uniform, the way it flows over. You can see the quality there. You can see, oh, man, just the way that the subdials play with light in different ways, the way the colors, the textures, everything has a certain level of life and play to it, which I think Zenith have just been ahead of the game. I mean, it's one thing to have wild, kind of Skittlesy colors, right, that kind of pop and feel very summery. It's another thing to put together a really tried and tested color palette and colorway that just makes sense, feels right, looks right, and it just goes, guys. This whole, everything about this watch for me, it just goes, and I'm really appreciative to the team over at Belmont Watches for letting me spend some time with this piece to share it with you guys, for those of you that might be considering just an iconic chronograph for your collection, and looking for, of course, maybe just some cool enthusiast dealers that aren't huge or anything like that, that don't have to mark up a lot of things to cover a lot of overhead. Really small operation, but all about passion. So guys, closing thoughts on the wrist: perfectly balanced proportions. The visual, I think, design weight is amazing, as well as, you know, the trim compactness of the layout. So there's the actual physical weight that I think is well balanced, but then there's also the design weight, which I think is, you know, next level. You know, they're really almost in a league of their own in terms of what they're able to do in such a small svelte package. I'm very, very impressed. Now, in terms of model variants, there's quite a few options released, so definitely check the Zenith website for availability. In terms of comparable models, you know, as iconic as any chronograph there is, I'd say this piece, while Zenith doesn't quite carry as much weight as, you know, at least with the non-enthusiast community, you know, let's say to the casual shoppers, I think that might even be read as a positive thing, because it kind of makes it a connoisseur's choice. So it's not something you're going to accidentally buy and fall in love with. Like, you're not, chances are, if you see this on somebody's wrist, it's something that they're immensely passionate about, that they know the history and the story, and which might not be the case for a Speedmaster. Let's face it. People might know it's a moon watch, but for the most part, there's probably a lot of guys that are out there that it's more of a flex piece, more of a I made it type of piece, which is great, and that's an amazing sentiment. But when it comes to this timepiece, I think there's just another kind of level of enthusiasm that's there, that's driving it, because it's not perfect, you know, and I think it's because of that, it gives you maybe less to like, but more to love, if that makes any sense. Guys, the bottom line, this is one of the most iconic and capable chronographs on the market, and you can actually get it for under retail, which is very rare in today's market, even though as it does continue to kind of course correct. I'm still really impressed with it, and honestly, like, wow, I need to make more money so I can buy this bad boy. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.